Well, good afternoon and welcome. This is 12 Report. My name is Mazino Appeal, sitting in for Blessings Masubu. Now, today, tragedy hits Mongoro area of Lagos as two-story structure collapsed, leaving many casualties. Authorities in Kogi State take steps to avert health disaster as floods submerge 5 communities in the state. And also, Malawians celebrate as Electoral Commission declares former President Peter Mutharika winner of just concluded presidential election. Well, as usual, we have our reporters stationed in different parts of the country and also outside. Afia Hagen joins us from London, the UK, while Victor Mbadike is on the streets of Lagos and Joshua Imarai is on standby in Abuja. We've got the details in a moment. Welcome again. Now, the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun, will today arraign 5 retired senior police officers before Justice Yusuf Halilu of the Federal Capital Territory High Court in Abuja. Those listed in the 14 counts charge are Benneth Igwe, Simon Lowe, Ido Owuhunwa, Ukachi Okpara, and Obo Ukam, alongside others said to be at large. Now, they're accused of falsifying their ages to unlawfully extend their years of service. If present in court, the retired officers are expected to take their pleas today. Now, our correspondent, Joshua Imarai, in the FCT High Court, well, he's got the updates. Joshua, good to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. First, were the accused officers present in court today, if you don't mind? Do tell us.
Well, good afternoon, Martino. Unfortunately for the prosecution, none of the defendants were available in court to take their pleas today at the commencement of proceedings. But however, the prosecution however told the court that the case should continue without them. But the judge stopped in there, saying there was no legal grounds for a case to continue in like situation because none of the defendants were in court or have been arraigned prior to this incident. And the prosecution complained bitterly that on several attempts that these defendants were supposed to appear in court, none of them showed up, and that he urged the court to continue the case. But the court discountenanced that application and said that only when these individuals are available and present in court, that only then can the trial continue and the arraignment continue.
So what else happened in court today that we might find interesting, please?
Well, the prosecution told the court that since the defendant's counsel was available in court, that means that the defendants are aware that there's a case against them. But surprisingly, the defendant's counsel told the court that they are yet to see the charge sheet and summons, that they are not even aware of the current allegations leveled against the client. And the defendant counsel also told the court, told Justice Haliru, that they have an application pending before the court and that the prosecution have been served. But Justice Haliru stopped them there and told them that no, such application cannot be taken unless the defendant is in court. However, this led to tensions flaring between the prosecution and the defendant. The defendant happens to be a senior advocate of Nigeria, while the prosecution is a commissioner of police representing the IGP in this case. Well, the entire thing was controlled by Justice Halilu, and the case was adjourned to November 17th for arraignment. However, the defendant counsel told the court that former Inspector General of Police, that's Michael Kiro, was already intervening in this situation, perhaps to broker peace between the IGP and the warring parties. Justice Halilu, however, ruled that the case will continue November 17th, and the defendants will be expected to take their plea. Mazino.
Oh, Joseph, one more thing. I'm wondering what observers have been saying regarding the situation here, especially in a climate where we're trying to tackle corruption. Are there any observable, maybe arguments regarding the way the proceedings are going in court?
Well, individuals from several quarters are saying that these individuals were not ready to come to court to answer their case. And the likes of human rights activists already was in court today to observe proceedings. And he's saying that the IG is disinterested in prosecuting these individuals, that if they were, the same way they arrested Nnamdi Kanu in Kenya and the same way they arrested Traore on several attempts, these persons could be arrested and brought to court. But they are saying that the IG is disinterested or not willing to continue with the case. But if not, he has the legal powers to ensure that these individuals are brought to court to answer the case hanging over their heads.
Well, Imarai, I want to say thank you very much for joining us for the 12 report today. We'll always come to you for more on this or details about this case. Thank you very much, Joseph. Now to another worrying case of building collapse in Lagos. 6 people have been rescued after a 2-story building gave way in Mongoro area of Alimosho. The incident happened around 6 p.m. on Wednesday, catching residents off guard and also triggering a swift emergency response. Among those rescued was a 44-year-old man who suffered fractures and bruises. Officials say they're still investigating the cause of the collapse, which comes just weeks after another tragic building failure in Ebute-Metta. Nigeria is once again pushing for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, insisting that it's time Africa got fairer representation at the global table. Vice President Kashim Shettima made the call during his address at the UN General Assembly in New York. He told world leaders that the UN must evolve to reflect today's realities, especially when it comes to global governance. Shettima also reaffirmed Nigeria's strong support for the Sustainable Development Goals and its commitment to peace, especially in conflict-hit regions like the Democratic Republic of Congo. He added that Nigeria is serious about multilateralism and is working to become Africa's #1 destination for investment.
Nigeria must have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. This should take place. This should take place as part of a wider process of institutional reform. 2, we need urgent action to promote sovereign debt relief and access to trade and financing. 3, countries that host minerals must benefit from those minerals. And 4th, the digital divide must close. As our friend the Secretary General has said, AI must stand for Africa included. On my first point, the United Nations will recover its relevance only when it reflects the world as it is, not as it was. Nigeria's journey tells this story with clarity. When the UN was founded, we were a colony of 20 million people, absent from the tables where decisions about our fate were taken. Today, we are a sovereign nation of 236 million people, projected to be the 3rd most populous country in the world, with one of the youngest and most dynamic populations on earth, a stabilizing force in regional security, and a consistent partner in global peacemaking. Our case for permanent seat at the Security Council is a demand for fairness, for representation, and for reform that restores credibility to the very institution upon which the hope of multilateralism rests. This is why Nigeria stands firmly behind the UN-80 initiative of the UN Secretary General and the resolution adopted by this Assembly on 18 July 2025, a bold step to reform the wider United Nations system for greater relevance, efficiency, and effectiveness in the face of unprecedented financial strain. We support the drive to rationalize structures and end the duplication of responsibilities and programs, so that this institution may speak with one voice and act with greater coherence. Madam President, Africa, none of us in this world can function peacefully in isolation. This is the heavy burden of sovereignty. Sovereignty is a covenant of shared responsibility, a recognition that our survival is bound to the survival of others. To live up to this charge, we must work hand in hand with our neighbors and partners. We must follow the trails of weapons, of money, and of people. For these forces, too often driven by faceless non-state actors, ignite the fires of conflict across our region. Madam President, Nigeria's soldiers and civilians carry a proud legacy. They have participated in 51 out of 60 United Nations peacekeeping operations since our independence in 1960. We have stood with our partners in Africa to resolve conflicts, and we continue that commitment today.
Now, on Hunger 80, Professor Kenneth Nweke joins me now to discuss Nigeria's demand for permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Welcome, Prof. Thank you very much for joining us inside of 12 Report. Professor, Nigeria has renewed its call once again for a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. From a political standpoint, how realistic is this ambition? And what would it mean for Nigeria and Africa at large if this was to be granted?
Yeah, ordinarily, then it would have been a good thing to be granted permanent membership of the Security Council. But unfortunately, so on what basis would Nigeria, for instance, be granted such? It is not as if one should cast aspersion on one's country. We should be able to talk things that should promote, our own country before the outside world. Being a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council would have been something, good. But it is not to for a country like us to go outside there and want to, play or be seen to be playing a big role in the UN. And yet at home, there's hunger here, there's no electricity, there's no road, nothing. And so on what basis are you asking? And again, you imagine where the U.S. Department of State, is coming up with threats of canceling our visas and, for the corrupt officials of Nigerians and all that. What kind of thing is that? And so, and then you want to go ask for membership of the Security Council of the United Nations. Yes, it is a call, and it's a call. It's another renewed call, and it will end there. I don't see that happening, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we shouldn't be in the, we shouldn't ordinarily join in campaigning against our own country, but the political leadership needs to, get back home to fix Nigeria. We need to fix ourselves first before we want to project ourselves before the outside world, because if we don't have that foundation to be able to launch ourselves at that level, then we would have as well looked very empty, even in sitting there, assuming without considering that it is granted to Nigeria. But you must have resources, to be able to do that. Then you must also show that in governance, there is transparency in terms of managing resources. But unfortunately, that's not what we find in Nigeria. There is corruption on the high side, and then the infrastructure is nothing to write home about. The economy is in shambles. And so what are you asking to become a permanent member of? Is it a fun fair? Not a fun fair. Come back home here. We want to see that governance is improved, that life and properties are protected. And that's what we need.
Professor?
It's not a time to go and show and remain a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It will not bring us food on the table.
Okay. So, Professor, your skepticism actually worries me, but then again, your informed conclusion there explains why. But let's ask, we've seen growing debates around reforming global institutions like the UN. Trump was very, very vocal about that one. In your view, what structural changes are most urgently needed to make these bodies more representative and also effective, especially when it comes to the African context?
Yeah, of course. Before we begin to expect those things, those reforms, at that level to begin to impact on us or begin to ask certain things that should impact on us. First of all, we must deal with the issues, locally, domestically. These issues are around, managing our resources. The issues around our elections. How are we, able to manage, our electoral processes in such a manner that, the right leaders are enthroned, and then how is judiciary that ought to be the arbiter, able to adjudicate matters, of elections and all of those. So those things matter so much. So it is not about the reforms that go on at that level, how they impact on us as a country, yes, or as Africans. Yeah, they are very critical. But we must, as a people, begin to reform ourselves. We must begin to do certain things that ought to change, ourselves for good. Yeah, we are still struggling with leading people. We are still struggling with leading people. We are still struggling with making people to have for followership to elect their leaders. And so we are still struggling with just election. And then we are struggling with managing our resources efficiently. And this corruption is high, infrastructure is on the high decay and all that. So what are we expecting those reforms at the UN to impact us? Yes, Trump spoke about how to do, but Trump has his own issues too, because he doesn't want people to come to his country, and then he's also encouraging other countries to discourage people from entering their countries and all that. And because we are not able to manage our resources efficiently for our own good, for the good of our people. So why if we do that, Trump will not be speaking the way he's speaking, because it's not also, his government is not also taking the burdens that the United States used to take, around the things that concern the United Nations, bearing the financial brunt of the United Nations. And so for me, as far as I'm concerned, it's important to begin to, look at why, we have remained where we are over time, and stop expecting the best things to come from such organizations as the United Nations.
Okay. All right, now, Professor Weke, let's talk about Shettima's speech. Let's talk about the fact that he's touched on immigration development, and he also talked about, Nigeria being the moral voice for the South. He talked about our position when it comes to certain wars across the world, especially when it has to do with the Israel-Hamas issue. Now, I'm wondering, where does this position Nigeria when it comes to its allies with other countries who might have differing position on that war?
Yeah, of course, and I do not even know where Nigeria stands as it is.
Let me let you know where Nigeria stands. As of 2012, Nigeria actually recognized Palestine, and since then we've had very long-standing relationship with them.
Yeah, so what I'm saying now, other countries have come out clearly. The UK, of course, has come out clearly, Canada, Australia, to recognize. So I'm sure that Nigeria will be a bit careful in where it goes. Of course, that is not also in tandem with the expectations of a Trump-led government of the United States, and that's not also going down well with him. You can also see that, you can also observe that, while he was presenting his own address. And so, for me, I think that Nigeria has also come to some crossroads as it is right now. I may not be able to be very open and visibly to do so, as far as this matter is concerned. I'm thinking that Nigeria, even if that had been done before, will be a bit careful in coming out clearly, to recognize the Palestinian state or joining forces, with maybe like under the Commonwealth ordinarily. That should be where it should go. That Nigeria will. I see them joining the other Commonwealth, nations in recognizing the Palestinian state, and again being the fact that it is not going down well with Trump, again. Nigeria appears to be having some kind of
Professor, I'm very sorry, but I'll have to cut you there because we have run out of time for this conversation. But thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Nweke, for giving us your detailed input on this conversation. Thank you, sir. Now let's take a break. When we return, we've got more reports inside of 12 Report. Well, welcome back. And earlier we told about a story of six people who have been rescued from the collapse of a two-story building which gave way in Mangoro area of Alimosho. We had our correspondent Victor Mbadike on standby. We still do. We've reconnected with him. Victor, good morning. Thank you very much for, weathering the storm out there. But please do give us updates. We hear 6 people have been rescued alongside a 44-year-old man. Please tell us what's happening right now.
Oh, thank you, Mazino. First of all, this is number 4 Mudepola Mangoro Street here in Alimosho local government area of Lagos State. We understand that this building you see right above me, because I'm right in the adjoining building. Basically, we could not get access into the main building where the incident happened because the Lagos State government had come to cordon off that place. So we could not get strict jacket access into the building. So we had to come into another building that is quite close to the affected building. Now, if you look at that building very quickly, we understand that originally it's a one-story building actually that has been built for over 20 years or even more. And the owner of the building felt that it would be nice to add one more structure to this particular building you see. And then this is where the problem began. So yesterday, sometime around 6, between the hours of 5 and 7, it partially collapsed just right at that behind there that you can see. We understand that about 8 workers were on this particular structure working, putting up this decking, this structure that you see. While it was raining, they were also working as well. But unfortunately, because I spoke to residents around here who would not want to speak to me. Of course, the rain is falling and they wouldn't want to be in the rain. But they did tell me that around 6 or 6:30, they had a loud bang from this place. So the building partially collapsed and all of the 8 workers were, trapped under that rubble. Of course, help didn't come on time. We had just local residents who just began to see what they could do to, rescue the situation. We understand that 8 of them have been rescued and they've all been, taken to hospitals, for medical checkup, which is quite, cool because it could have been worse. It could have been much more terrible than this. But again, you also notice that the impact of that particular structure, caved into this particular building that I am in currently. But thankfully, it didn't really affect much. Just I don't know if Thomas could show us much about that. The structure just about hit just a couple of windows and just a little, impact, but not much. But that's thankfully, like I said, we didn't get to see, get to hear much more impact of that. But basically, this building again, like I say, it's over 25 or 20 years old, but the owner felt that if I add one more structure, maybe I could make more money, but not forgetting the fact that he was supposed to have done what they call a foundation probing to be sure that putting up another structure on this one-story would be worth it. Because if he had done that, he would easily know if it was something that was possible or not, but he just went ahead to just do it. And then when the rains came down heavily, with the impact of the rain and with the fact that the foundation was not solid enough to contain another story, this building partially collapsed. Mazino, the good thing is all 8 workers are in the hospital as we speak right now, receiving treatment, no casualty, and that's the fact. So far, LABSCA, the Lagos State Building Agency, Control Agency, have sealed up this particular building. I wish we could get visuals because, of course, I can't appear twice. And I've shown you the main gate of that particular structure where you get to see the tape cordoned off. So no entrance, no access into the building because Lagos State has sealed it off. But at the moment, this is the situation. All trapped workers have been rescued and taken to the hospital for medical checkup, Mazino.
Well, Victor, thank you very much. Let's get you out of the rain, but I will say at least you're earning that hazard pay that they're paying you. So fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, more report here. The federal government has announced Nigeria at 65, all hands on deck for a greater nation as the official theme for the country's 2025 Independence Day celebration. Segun Imohianse, Director of Information and Public Relations at the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, said the theme calls for unity, collaboration and patriotism among all sectors to drive national peace and progress. Planned activities include a Jumat service, that's a Jumat prayer, on September 26, an interdenominational church service on September 28, and a World Press Conference in Abuja on September 29. Ahead of coronation of the 44th Olubadan of Ibadan land, Oba Rashidi Ladoja, on Friday, the Oyo State government has expressed readiness to host the historic event. Security in the town has also been strengthened ahead of the expected arrival of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and other important dignitaries. Ladoja, who would receive both the staff of office and instrument of office on Friday, succeeds Oba Owolabi Olakunlehin, who joined his ancestors on Monday, July 7, 2025, at the age of 90 years. On Wednesday, the first ever Olubadan coronation lecture was held in honor of the 44th Olubadan of Ibadan land. The event drew distinguished traditional rulers, scholars, and dignitaries celebrating the monarch and the enduring culture significance of the Olubadan stool. And more on the reins now. I beg your pardon. Let's talk about President Bola Tinubu as he conferred national honors on 4 late Ogoni leaders, popularly remembered as the Ogoni Four: Albert Bade, Edward Kobani, Theophilus Orage, and also Samuel Orage. Now deceased were each awarded the Commander of the Order of the Niger. The announcement came as the President received the report of the Ogoni Consultations Committee on the State House in Abuja, at the State House in Abuja. News Central's Bettina Welly reports on more.
President Bola Tinubu has urged the Ogoni people to embrace reconciliation and unity after decades of division, assuring that his administration will back peace, environmental recovery, and economic revival of the region.
Today, in completing the cycle of recognition, I hereby confirm national honor as a Commander of the Order of Niger, CON, on the following auspicious: Chief Edward Kobani, CON, posthumous; Chief Albert Bade, CON, posthumous; Chief Samuel Orage, CON, posthumous; Chief Theophilus Orage, CON, posthumous.
The President also pledged government support for the resumption of oil production in Ogoniland, directing the National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu to begin engagement with stakeholders to finalize modalities for restarting operations. The NSA and committee chairman, Professor Don Baridam, explained that the consultations reflected the collective will of the people, with demands for structured participation in oil production, renewed cleanup efforts, and sustainable development.
Recognizing the Ogoni Four will demonstrate a holistic commitment to acknowledging all victims of the past conflicts and a deeper understanding of the complex historical context. It will further pave the way for lasting peace, unity, and a sense of complete justice within the Ogoni Nation and the broader Niger Delta region.
There is every sign that this government is serious about resolving these issues, and I think we need to give them all the necessary opportunity and time to ensure that this problem is resolved once and for all.
The President says that the reopening of oil exploration must transform Ogoni's painful history into a foundation for lasting peace, prosperity, and national progress. In Abuja, for News Central, Bettina Nwili.
Now that talk about the rains. Floodwaters have submerged 5 communities in Kogi State: Ota, Ofogbo, Itima, Owara, and also others in Ibaji local government area. The Executive Secretary of the Kogi State Emergency Management Agency, Mokhtar Tima, has urged communities along the River Niger and River Benue banks to relocate immediately to safer ground. Atima, leading an emergency response team during a visit to the State Commissioner of Health, Dr. Adams Abdulaziz, said the rising water levels have made the state unsafe. The Commissioner, Dr. Abdulaziz, emphasized readiness for potential disease outbreak connected to the flooding. He also commended Governor Usman Ododo's commitment to health and disaster response, noting that last year's floods resulted in no casualties due to prompt government action. And outside of Nigeria, Chakwera, a pastor before entering politics, conceded defeat ahead of the final result being declared, phoning Mutharika to congratulate him on his historic win. Mutharika, a former professor of law, served as president from 2014 to 2020 when he lost to Chakwera by a wide margin. Now he inherits an economy that is in deep crisis, with a severe shortage of fuel and foreign currency, with the official inflation rate close to 30%. In South Africa, Malawians have mixed feelings about Mutharika back in power. Our correspondent Mongani Sisiba here has more.
Good afternoon to you, coming from the vibrant streets of Johannesburg, where Malawians residing here are reacting to the recent political developments back home, where we saw jubilation in the streets of Malawi as outgoing President Lazarus Chakwera addressed the nation about the recent elections, with many Malawians eager for change, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation.
I have done this because I accept the results of the presidential election that the Malawi Electoral Commission has already validated and released, just as I will accept the final result.
Malawians here in South Africa have their hopes high but cautious. They want to see real change and progress and a government that prioritizes economic recovery.
It's very great and wonderful since we have been suffering for 5 years, but now we get it back. I know and I believe in him. He said that we change everything and Malawi will be better and it will be a great day again.
I'm feeling so excited because the man was there before and we give him a second chance so that he can rule our country again, so that maybe Malawi can be better again.
Interestingly, many Malawians seem to have favored former President Peter Mutharika's return over the current leadership. However, critics debate why Malawi is stuck in a cycle of recycling old leaders instead of embracing fresh and young leadership.
I don't think it's gonna do well, because the last time he didn't do anything. How can he do it this time? He can't. We need a new one. We need someone new, not him. He must go out. We need a fresh blood, something new. We are tired of this old school.
Back in Malawi, the sentiment is similar, as Malawians are grappling with high cost of living, with inflation soaring over 30%. The big question now is, will the incoming president be able to tame inflation and maybe steer Malawi back to economic stability?
Chakwera, you see, the rate of money is too much. Everything is expensive for now, ne? So I don't like Chakwera, but I know everything gonna be alright because Peter Mutharika is back. I love too much a daddy, yeah.
According to Malawians law, the country has between 7 to 30 days to officially inaugurate new president. As the nation waits with bated breath for a positive change, all eyes are in Malawi. From me, Bongani Siziba, it's now back to you in the studio.
Well, we have strategist Larry Toluhi. He joins us now from Manchester, United Kingdom, to discuss Nigeria's demand for permanent seat on the UN Security Council. You're welcome, Larry. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I beg your pardon. Now, that's not the story we're having you on. We're actually talking on Peter Mutharika as he makes a political comeback. I beg your pardon. My little mistake there. But let's talk about this. After 5 years out of office, what does his return signal about voter sentiment and also the political landscape in Malawi today? What do you think?
Yeah, sorry, connectivity is kind of not so clear, so I could barely hear your question, please.
I had asked, after 5 years and a return now, what do you think of the elections that just held in Malawi, especially noting that there has been widespread, well, let's say, discrepancies in the results collation?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon for having me. But if like I said, the connectivity is kind of funny, but I think what you're asking is what's my feel about the election that was held in Malawi? And if that was what you've asked, I think the election that was held in Malawi just goes a long way to show what some of us have been complaining about that's happening in Africa, where we see Africa having a way to recycle some leaders and having some people think it is their birthright to have the leadership of their country or any which you see, and at the same time to the African nation and the way the populace in Africa, the way we vote and the way we go about our leadership recruitment is not something to be proud of, because you see the man that was voted now is 85-year-old man that was voted back in power. He was the one that was voted out in 2019, 2020 rerun election. Now he's back to power, even after his brother was in power at the time, you know. And when we see all these things happen, one begin to question, are you saying in the whole of Malawi, there are just two families, or they're just a family, or they're just a family that can take up the mantle of leadership? The man that is there presently, Chakwera, right? being an evangelist. He had failed according to what they have seen because the economic indices isn't looking well for him. Now he's going back to his successor will not be his predecessor will not become his successor again. Is there no fresh idea? Is there no fresh person? Is there no fresh brain that can take over the mantle and give Malawians the 21st century leadership that is needed? Because the truth is, you don't expect an 85-year-old man to provide solution to the problem that it's a 21st century problem. I think that's one of the things. Our leadership recruitment process in Africa is faulty. I've always said it, and we need to rejig that. And the people, all Africans, need to start knowing that election, we need to bring in a little bit of credibility, integrity, and better ways of choosing our leaders.
Taluhi, there was something that happened while the elections results were being collated. There was kind of like a media blackout. Even the state broadcaster stopped or suspended, maybe I should say, live coverage of the collation. So the question is, how does this affect the legitimacy of the elections? And how does it affect public perception of the elections?
See, the public perception of the election, the legitimacy of the election, do they really count in Africa? We've seen it even in Nigeria. We saw what happened in the elections and all that. It is everywhere in Africa, the integrity, the legitimacy, the integrity of elections in Africa, it's never perfect. It's never things to write home about. We've seen what we see in Africa. It's always been shrouded in a kind of funny things that are not straightforward. What kind of things happen, and you look at it and you tell yourself, how do we want to get it right? Because even the electoral umpires and all that, most of them are always political. Electoral umpires are meant to be apolitical, but in Africa we've seen opposite. That is the case where we see electoral umpires being political, being biased, and all that. You see them, the system being manipulated to favor some kind of people and to disfavor some kind of people and all that. Because we could tell ourselves the truth. Now Malawi is crying for the economic crunches, the hard economic and all that economic policies and the downward trend of the economy. But did it just start when this present government or this present president came on board? The answer is no. Now the 85-year-old law professor coming out, tell them he wants to fix it. Why didn't he fix it while he was in office? He failed while he was in office. That was why he was changed. But the Malawians are now brought him back again. It just shows the lack of seriousness, the lack of determination to make our nations better. And our electoral processes are marred with some kind of funny things that even primary school students will make the mistakes. But that is where we find ourselves. We just pray and we hope that we'll start taking the bull by the horn and start doing what is right and having the right policies, having the right structure, and ensuring that we are building structures in Africa and not building personalities, because that's one of the problems we have.
Larry Taluhi, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your 2 pence on the matter. Thank you indeed. Now let's take a short break. 12 Report returns soon. Welcome back. Still 12 Report here, and today marks the first day of the Ideas Pre-G20 conference in Johannesburg, where global policy makers, economists, and also thought leaders are exploring bold approaches to reshape economic policy from industrial development and financial autonomy in the global south. News Central's senior business correspondent, Joanna Mustafa, is on the ground with more. Joanna, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. What's happening on the ground right now?
Yes, I mean, it's my pleasure to be here. And I have with me Professor Patrick Bond. He is a professor at the University of Johannesburg. And he gave a very strong keynote address earlier this morning. I had to get him here to, of course, talk to us. One of the key things you mentioned was, in terms of global governance, the talk right, walk left, especially in relation to sustainability. So tell us a bit more about that and the hypocrisy around that.
In fact, it's talk left, walk right, because there's always a tendency in South Africa, I'm sure Nigerians know this, to brag about our liberation, and then to walk, let's say, dirty, but talk green. And so the green sustainability talk is something that's tragic today because the port where we send our coal from South Africa includes a ship that's going to Israel for the fueling of the genocide. At the same time, our President Cyril Ramaphosa has been in New York actively saying, no, we shouldn't be supporting genocide. We must have a boycott against Israel. And in fact, Nigeria sends Israel 9% of the oil that it uses. So in Africa, we have to really get strong and make sure that sustainability is for future generations, for the environment, and for the Palestinians. And I think this is the big problem in a group like the G20, where you've got imperialist powers, the West, the G1, the US, which is breaking away in all sorts of things like the climate summit, and you've got the G6, that is Europe, Japan, Canada. Then you've got the group of sub-imperial, the next layer of powerful actors. Some of them are in BRICS, and of course Nigeria is a partner to the BRICS. But the dilemma is we don't expect much sustainability either here in Johannesburg in late November or early November in Brazil when they have the climate summit, the COP30.
Mm-hmm. So talk left, walk right is what is happening right now, as opposed to talk left, walk left. Let's also talk about the tilt. It's been a conversation here. The tilt of, trade in favor of the US and how Africa should move in relation to that.
I know, it's so tragic. It's a period when Donald Trump has acted as a dictator, imposing, in fact, irrational rules. For Brazil, it means that they are not allowed to prosecute the past president who was trying to organize a coup. That was Jair Bolsonaro. He was prosecuted, found guilty last week, and so the U.S. has put a 50% tariff. And for India, even though the U.S. is importing uranium from Russia, because India imports oil and gas from Russia, they're getting the 50% tariff. Now, some African countries are down to 10% or 15%. South Africa was hit with 30%. We think it's largely because there's racial justice legislation here. There is support for Palestine, at least rhetorically. And also Elon Musk, who came from very close by here, was also very involved in that early round of tariffs to punish South Africa because we would force him to have a black partner when he brings the Starlink here.
Interesting. So Africa should be moving in the right direction, hopefully. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Professor Patrick Bond, here in Johannesburg.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Mustafa. Donald Trump delivered a controversial address at the UN General Assembly that broke sharply from traditional diplomacy. For almost an hour, he veered off prepared remarks to air personal grievances, criticize world leaders, and disparage the United Nations itself. His speech was marked by rambling digressions, including complaints about a decades-old construction bid dispute with the UN. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by our senior international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us in 12 Report. What has Donald Trump insinuated about his appearance at the UN earlier in the week?
Well, yes, he has been saying that triple sabotage occurred before his speech at the UN. So speaking on Truth Social, that's his social media platform, he talked about the fact that the escalator that he was traveling on just before he made his way up to the hall for the speech failed to work. He said that the world couldn't hear his speech because the microphones weren't working, and also the autocue wasn't working either. He actually referenced the autocue issue and the escalator issue in his speech. He said not one, not two, but three very sinister events. This wasn't a coincidence. This was triple sabotage at the UN. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. That's a direct quote from Donald Trump. That's what he said on Truth Social that happened. Now, the UN have come back. They said that it was perhaps because Trump's videographer was in front of himself and Melania going backwards up the escalator that caused it to stop. It was a safety issue. They've also said that the White House was in charge of the teleprompter, the autocue, and it's their fault it didn't work. As for world leaders not being able to hear him, they haven't addressed that, but they have said that they will work with the White House and Secret Service, who are now involved, to find out if triple sabotage has occurred.
Afia, well, thank you very much for those updates. That's as much as we can take because we have to run, but thank you. I'm sure we'll be asking you for more detail inside of our 3 o'clock bulletin. Thank you very much, Afia. Now, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has placed a $10,000 reward for information leading to the capture of Nigerian national Olumide Adebiyi Adedira, who has been on the run for over 20 years now. Adedira disappeared in December 2001, shortly before his federal trial in Illinois was due to begin. Now, he had been charged with bank fraud, identification document fraud, and also credit card fraud. According to investigators, he attempted to withdraw funds using a fraudulent check and also used stolen personal information of U.S. citizens to open accounts. Now, Global Affairs analyst Ejike Okpa joins us now to discuss this development. Ejike, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. As a Nigerian living in the U.S. and a global affairs analyst, how do you interpret the FBI's renewed push over 2 decades later for Olumide Adebiyi?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was born and raised in Nigeria. I'm a Nigerian by birth, but an American by choice. So I've lived in America longer than I was in Nigeria. But, you know, when it comes to crime of this nature, there is no statute of limitation. So if it takes 20 years, 30 years to catch this guy, that's what they're going to do. You know, when I worked for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, which is Nigerian equivalent of NDIC, I used to get credit a lot about fraudulent stuff. You know, the first time in the Dallas area a Nigerian was prosecuted was in 1989. And then there was a Nigerian by Tony Oyekon who also was about to be prosecuted. He absconded, you know, and he ran away. So, you know, the history of people are, you know, jumping bail and, you know, running back to another country is not new. It's just that, you know, based on what the FBI has to deal with, you know, things, you know, pop up, and they have to remind the public that they still have somebody who is on the run. If they can provide information to the arrest and successful prosecution, you know, there will be a reward for it.
Well, Ejike, thank you very much for that detail. We're going to leave it there because we are out of time, but thank you very much. Long days of rainfall in Lagos. We've got a very interesting postscript for you this morning. It's been a very interesting time, especially here in Lagos. It's 3 days of relentless rainfall. Now, Lagos is finally stretching itself back into the sun, as you can see, well, in certain parts. But the city is drying out, yes, but now comes the hard part, the big questions, counting the loss. Now, for the shop owner in maybe Computer Village, it was 3 days of shutdown. Not much sales because there was little traffic coming his way. For the roadside trader, their goods might have swum away faster than they could have even found customers. And for families, it was furniture, appliance, especially if you live in Lekki. And in some cases, the entire houses were soaked and ruined and gone. And for workers, well, the hours lost in traffic jams, that turned roads into rivers, and hours spent in Lagos, that is also loss. Now, when you put all that together, businesses halted, goods destroyed, productivity crippled, you begin to see how the GDP of Lagos, and yes, I mean Lagos now, quietly leaks away with the flood waters. It's not just individual losses when you count families and offices, it's a collective loss. It's the state's economy taking a big hit every single time the clouds actually decide to remind us who's in charge, Mother Nature. But yet, the rains, they're not a surprise. I mean, this is Lagos. Floods are not a mystery. They are as predictable as the headlines about them. Which makes you wonder, if the storms are so reliable, why isn't our preparedness just as reliable as they are? Why do we always scramble after the facts instead of doing the right thing at the right time? Enforcing building codes, we just had another collapse in Lagos. Clearing drainages. Victor Mbadike was out in the rains yesterday. Investing in infrastructure that can stand the test of water and time. Because until that happens, Lagos will keep treating every single rainy season like an unexpected visitor, when really it's a guest that books the same room, the same hotel, year after year. And so, as the sun returns, well, we're left with the bill. Not just in Naira and Kobo, but in lost opportunities, wasted time, and even an economy that's forever bailing water every single time it rains. I'm just saying, in Lagos, when it rains, I guess it pours, but the real storm is in the planning. And that's your postscript for today. Well, thank you very much for joining us, but we're not done yet. Nigeria's Golden Eaglets, well, let's talk about them because I think we have our sports guys who will be coming up after 12 report. Let's find out what Favor has to tell us about what we should expect. Favor Itwa, tell us more what we'll find out inside of sports today.
All right, interesting one, Martino, from the under-17 team. The Golden Eaglets, they went all the way to Cote d'Ivoire, defeated Benin Republic 4-1 to begin their under-17 campaign on a good note. It's all about qualifying for the Nations Cup and then at the end of the day, the World Cup. But we're talking more during in the game in the next few minutes.
All right, well, we can't wait to see that. And that's all on 12 Report today. I want to say thank you very much. And remember, you can send your eyewitness reports to the numbers that will be displayed on your screen now. And also do follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Able TV, and of course on YouTube. Well, many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.